Hello, everyone. Hi, welcome. Welcome to My English Lab, your English course. My name is Miles Thorogood, and thank you so much for joining us for this very special lesson where we will go over past perfect statements of for and since. That's where we're going to begin. But a little information about myself. I am a teacher, a choreographer, a director. I work with kids, and I'm here to do your lesson as well. So thank you for joining, and let's get to our lesson and have a great time doing it. I understand that we have been doing very well, so keep up the good work, and I look forward to continuing and finding out how well you do. Let's go to our book. So here we're going to find My English Lab, Future Level 3, Unit 4, very important, getting a job. We'll go down, look how much we've done already, excellent. Grammar, present perfect, statements. So, what does that mean? Grammar, perfect present, present perfect. Present perfect, well, you use present perfect to describe things that are with for or since. It's sort of like a timeline. A timeline is a description of things that have happened in the past and they continue on or they're happening now. So you use, I have been a teacher for 15 years since I was very young. So that's the present, the present perfect, it's very hard to say, present perfect lesson of for and since. So if we look at our lesson, we're going to have a listen to our grammar coach and get a better understanding of what the lesson is all about. So if you'll click on grammar coach, present perfect statements. There we go. And then I will make this large so that everyone can share it.
Hi, today's lesson is on the present perfect with for and since. This is my friend Anna. Have I told you about her? We've been good friends for a few years. I've only known her since 2013, but it feels like much longer. We've been good friends for a few years. I've only known her since 2013. We often use the present perfect with the words for and since to show actions that started in the past and are continuing in the present. For and since answer the question, how long? For example, how long has Anna lived in Mexico City? How long has she worked at the language school? We use for with a period of time. I've known Anna for a few years. We've been teachers for 6 years. Here are other phrases with for. For a long time. For 6 years. For 2 hours. For a week. We use since with a point in time. I've known Anna since 2013. We've been teachers since we finished graduate school. Here are other phrases with since. Since 2013. Since yesterday. Since 4 o'clock. Since I came to Mexico. Remember to use the present perfect with for and since. I've known my best friend for 8 years. Not
Great. So let's get out of our grammar coach and we'll get into our lesson. Unless anyone has questions before we begin. So let's look at the lesson of for and since in here, there. Switch. Okay, let's look at it. grammar, present perfect, statements with for and since. 1. This is our first lesson. Here you see pictures. These pictures are sort of a timeline. You'll see underneath they have dates of the year, each one, going back to 2005. So, it is now the year 2015. It's past 2015. We're actually in the year 2019. But this story is saying this story continues to 2015. Look at the timeline. Read the statements. Choose true or false. Okay. Here's the picture. Marcus moved to Anaheim, California in 2005. And then in 2007, Marcus got a job at Bill's Auto Shop. Then the timeline continues. In 2008, Marcus married Maria. Then the timeline continues. In 2010, Marcus received an ASE certification. I think you talked about certifications before. So, what we have to do is find the true or false statements in these questions below. So, let's read them. Marcus has lived in Anaheim since 2005. So, is that true or false? What do you think? True. Yes, true. So say the sentence. Marcus has lived in Anaheim since 2005. So there's our since, which is and it includes this entire time from 2005, he's lived in Anaheim. That's another way you could say it. Marcus has lived in Anaheim since 2005. Or you can switch it around. Since 2005, Marcus has lived in Anaheim. Either way, it's the same. You can start with the subject, who is Marcus. This is his verb, he's lived. Another noun, the place. And since is our present perfect. Marcus has lived in Anaheim since 2005. That's true. Marcus has been married for 6 years. Oh, so we have a little math with this next one. So we need to know a couple of things. Is it true or false? Oh, someone had the answer already. They did the math. So we're saying now is the year 2015. Ooh. And he got married in 2008. So 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. True. Marcus has worked at Bill's Auto Shop since 2007. True or false? True. Yes. The last one, number 4. Marcus has had ASE certification for 5 years. What year is it? It's 2015. He got it in 2010. True or false? Yes, it is true. Marcus has had his certification for 5 years, which is another way to say this sentence. He has had. Marcus has had his, or you can say Marcus has had certification, or Marcus has had his certification since, you have to say the year, since 2010. Very good. Any questions about the lesson?
Repeat number 3.
Number 3, Marcus has worked at Bill's Auto Shop since 2007. So this is the one with math. Now you can see has worked. That's true. Because here it says he got his job in 2007. So Marcus has worked at Bill's Auto Shop since 2007. He has worked there. Has worked at Bill's Auto Shop since 2007. So there's your present perfect example of since in Marcus's story. Any questions about that lesson? You guys did very well. I think you seem to understand it, or about for and since. If not, remember, go to the bottom of the page. As you can see, save your work, submit it, and close. Save, submit, and close. Very important. Remember to do that. Let's close out this lesson, and we'll move on. We're going to number 2 here. Grammar, perfect, present perfect, statements 2. So a statement, for and since. For, here, we'll get some information from our light bulb. We use the present perfect with for or since to describe an activity that began in the past and continues in the present. So it's something that has happened before. It began earlier on. In the past it began, and it's continuing now into the present, into the current day we are in. So we'll close out our grammar watch. As you can see, the subjects is he and we, and the have or has, the past participle being been and lived. Been is before. Lived is in the past. For and since describe, and then the time expression is like the number of years, or the month. Here is the example, January. So let's close that out and let's look at our actual lesson for present perfect statements with for and since. Complete the sentences. Click on the correct answers. Let's look at number 1. Cassie has been a teacher for 3 years or since 3 years. Type in the correct answer. Kathy has been a teacher. Number 2, Gog, it's an interesting name, and Terry have worked here for or since last June. We got it? Number 3, Raul's employer has been on vacation for 2 weeks or on vacation since 2 weeks. Which is correct? Type in your answer you believe is correct. And lastly, Sasha has worked as an architect for 5 years or since 5 years. Very good. Let's look at these sentences again and find the subject. Let's find the have or has, and find the past participle and the for or since, and of course the time expression. So first of all, let's find the subject. In this sentence, what's the subject? Could you just type in what you believe is the subject of the sentence? Cassie has been a teacher for 3 years. And what about the past participle? the past participle is the word, actually, that is the answer. This is the past participle. For 3 years. And 3 years is our time expression. 3 years. Cassie, our subject, has been a teacher, our past participle. 3 years being our time expression. Let's go on to the next one. Let's just find out. So here, what would our subject be? Maybe we'll switch it around. Who's the subject in this sentence? Or who are the subjects, I should say? Can you type in who the subject would be? Aha. Past participle. Been. Yes. Been is another past participle. Yes. Good. And in number 3, what is our time expression? The expression of time past. Raul's employer has been on vacation for 2 weeks. Been is also past participle. 2 weeks would be our time expression. And lastly, Sasha, our subject, has worked. This is our verb, work. Worked, being in the past. Worked as an architect for 5 years, our time expression. Save your work, submit it, and close, and we'll go on to our next lesson. Let's see. Lesson number 3. We'll switch it to our view. Oh, I did it twice. Sorry about that. Again, you'll find the present perfect in all of these sentences, which include our subject, our have or has, our past participle, for or since. This is a descriptive, and the time expression. Let's find them. Let's put in the correct answers. This one, you'll have to click on the box to find the correct answer. It says, complete the sentences, click on the box, then click on the correct answer. Let's read the sentences. Maya has been a security guard. And let's look at our drop down. What are our options there? For or since 6 months. Has been a security guard for 6 months. Has been a security guard since 6 months.
Four.
Correct. For 6 months. Going on. Gail has worked at the hospital for or since July 10th, 2007. Since. And going on to number 3. Henry has worked full-time since or for. He received his certificate in website design. Do you get since? Excellent. Number 4. I haven't heard from the employment agency blank June. For or since? Since. Number 5. We have lived in Southern California for or since more than 10 years? Anna, number 6, Anna has worked in the hotel industry for or since she started college. What do you think? Since. Kwan Su hasn't had to clean tables for or since he started working as an assistant chef. He hasn't had to clean tables for or since he started working as an assistant chef. Since. Very good. And lastly, number 8. John has been out of work for or since 6 months. For. Great. So as you can see here, each one of these sentences using for and since have the subject and the timeline. So you have to know when to use for and when to use since. So here, let's look at the difference between one that uses since and one that uses for. The first one. Maya has been a security guard for 6 months. Now, the next one, Gail has worked at the hospital since July 10th, 2007. So this is amount of time. This is a specific date that you're going back to. So you could say Gail has worked at the hospital since July 10th, 2007, or Gail has been at the hospital since that date. It's the same. She has been, or you can say she has been working, or Gail has worked at the hospital since July. To change this one, Maya has been a security guard for 6 months. For 6 months. Since 6 months ago. He has been a security guard for 6 months. Has been. You can put the has been here. She has been working at the hospital since this date. Okay, let's close this out unless people have questions about the use of for or since in this context. And we'll go on to our next lesson. You guys are doing very, very well. Good job. We'll close out. And we'll move on. We're on grammar, present perfect, number 4, statements. 4. So when you see the word statements, they're saying statements of fact. There we go. It's information. And it's usually something people are saying. It's part of a conversation. Here, in this next lesson, you're going to complete the sentences by typing. We'll type again. Typing the present perfect form of the verbs in parentheses. That's these things. The form of the verb in parentheses and for or since. Okay? Here's our example. Number 1. Alice has volunteered. Volunteer is the present at the hospital for 3 years. So you have the verb, which is the action, what they are doing in each of these sentences. That's a verb, the action word. You have to change that so that it becomes a present perfect. So let's look at number 2. Bill owned his own lawn service for or since 2008. What's the answer? Can you type it in? Mm-hmm. What about the first one? So it's the form of being that becomes a possession. Bill, do we have it? Mm-hmm. Has. Bill has owned his lawn service since 2008. So does that make sense? So Bill is the owner of the lawn service. So it's in the past where he started it. He has owned his own lawn service since 2008. Hmm? It's interesting that they have, as this example, they have the word owned and owned twice. Has owned, his own. So has owned is the possession that Bill has. You can say, I own this marker. It's mine. I own this. He owns his lawn service. It's not an actual thing he possesses, but it is a business that he owns, that he is in charge of. Let's look at number 3. June, be an HVAC mechanic. You know what an HVAC mechanic is? An HVAC mechanic is like air conditioning, heating, to keep you cool or hot. And so you're comfortable. So it's someone who works on air conditioning and cooling, heating and cooling. So June, be an HVAC mechanic, blank 2003. What do you think it is? Remember, the being, what is it? How does this change so that June, the subject, is doing the action? What did you think? Too many. Is this what you got? June has been an HVAC mechanic since 2003. Since 2003. June has been an HVAC mechanic since 2003. So he started in the past, has been, and continuing since 2003. Let's look at number 4. We serve customers here blank 8 years. We serve. How does serve become the present perfect? Remember, we is plural, so there's more than one. And remember, that has changes in the plural to become what? What's our answers? We have served. We have served customers here since. It's not since. For. Try to fool you there. We have served customers here for 8 years. Because we're not talking about a specific time. We're talking about a number of years. 8 years. You wouldn't say since 8 years. You've been saying for 8 years. Since, now you could say when was 8 years ago? It's 2019, and we'll minus 8. So you could say, we have been serving customers since, if you put in a specific date. This we're just saying a number of years, 8 years. We have served customers here for 8 years. Since 2000 and, I could do math. 11, correct. I was like, what year is it? Since 2011. Number 5, she worked at the post office June. So we have a specific time she worked. What's our answer? How do you make work in the past? The present perfect past. Has worked, correct. Oh, I can't spell today. I still can't spell. R-E-D. There you go. Oh my goodness. Yes. Since. Very good. She has worked at the post office since June. Now, if you can say June, you can change it to the number of months it was ago. Then you can say, she has worked at the post office since June for the number of months. For 9 months. Last one, number 6. Greg and Tim be security guards blank 5 months. There's an example, actually, of what I was just talking about. So what is the present perfect of be with Greg and Tim being security guards? They, what's our answer? Type it in. Did you say get 4? Correct. Yes. Greg and Tim have been security guards for 5 months. So let's look at these sentences so we can understand the usage of for and since. Alice has volunteered at the hospital for 3 years. Bill has owned his own lawn service since 2008. Jun has been an HVAC mechanic since 2003. We have served customers here for 8 years. She has worked at the post office since June. Greg and Tim have been security guards for 5 months. So, the subject, Greg and Tim, she, we, Jun, Bill, and Alice. That's our subject. You can have this one that says Greg and Tim. It could also be, if you don't use their proper name, you can say they. They have been security guards for 5 months. Greg and Tim, you could say their names, or they have been. She, if you know her name, maybe it's Alice. Alice has worked at the post office since June. That's our perfect present perfect. Our perfect present perfect, actually. Well done. Remember, go down to the bottom of the page. Always, good time. Saving, submit, and close. Save, submit, and close. Our present perfect statements with for and since. Let's go on to our next lesson. We'll close this out. There we are. And if you'll look down, we are now out of grammar. So congratulations for getting through grammar, present perfect, and statements. If you have any questions about what we've just done, please feel free to ask any questions that you may have. If not, then we will move on to listening and speaking. Learn about illegal interview questions. It's very important. Speaking and listening. Now, in this lesson, we're going to listen to a radio announcement, something that's on the radio. And then we're going to read the sentences, and you're going to click on true or false to tell me if the sentences are true or false. But to get the information, we must listen to the audio. So you'll see the little audio button here. Let's click and let's listen.
I'm Val Corey. We're here today with Leon Vasquez, talking about the rights of employees. Leon is a career counselor at the Greenville Adult School. Today, he's going to talk about our rights at job interviews. Leon, what questions are illegal for an employer to ask at a job interview?
Well, first of all, interviewers are not allowed to ask a person's age.
Really? Why is that? You can usually tell a person's age just by looking at them.
That's true, but it's still illegal for an employer to ask your age. It's a way to protect older workers from discrimination.
I see. Can you give us another example of an illegal question?
All right, here's a common one. Employers are not allowed to ask if someone is married or has children.
Why would employers want to know that?
The employer might think that if someone has little children, they won't be dependable. They may think the mother or father will call in sick too often or come late.
So questions about age and family are not allowed. Are there other types of illegal questions?
Yes, there are many. For example, employers can ask questions about religion, race, age, or national origin.
Really? You mean an employer isn't allowed to ask, where were you born?
That's correct.
How interesting. I had no idea. Well, thanks, Leon. We have to take a break now. We'll be back after this commercial break with your questions for Leon Vasquez.
Great. Well, that was a very, very interesting conversation. The conversation included many important points about what an employer can ask you when you're going to an interview for a job. It's very important that you know your rights and understand what an employer can and cannot ask you. As you can see, it's a very long conversation. There's a lot of information in the conversation, and the information that's in the conversation is used as our lesson. So it's very important that you get a clear understanding of what points are being made in the conversation so that you can get the correct answers, which will be true or false, based on the audio that we just listened to. So I think what we'll do is we'll give this as homework because there's a lot to listen to. But the important point that you need to know is that this lesson is about learning what someone can and cannot ask you when you're at a job interview. And they're asking questions about your religion or how old you are because of discrimination or things like that, which they shouldn't be doing. So be sure to listen to this, and then you'll fill in the answers. There are true or false, so there's nothing to type. You just have to click on the correct answer being true or false. But we'll do this as your homework because it's a lot to listen to. So if you go to the bottom of the page there, we'll close this out and we'll move on to the next lesson and see if we can do that. But remember, this is your homework. True or false questions about interviews and what they can ask you at a job interview, about what employers who are hiring you for a job, what they can and cannot ask you. So we'll move down to the bottom of the page. We'll close this out. So be sure to do this as your homework. And again, remember to save and submit your work and close it out. So we're going to close this and let's move on to listening and speaking in that same, there we go. We'll have the grammar. There we are. Here, grammar, it and be and the adjective and the infinitive. Well, we will definitely listen to the grammar coach for this one to get a clear understanding of this lesson. I'll have to play it and then make it larger.
Hello. Today's lesson is about it plus be plus adjective plus infinitive. A new teacher just started at my school. I gave her some advice. I said, it's a good idea to learn your students' names the first day. It wasn't difficult for me to remember my students' names. It isn't easy to find a parking space in the morning. It's really important to arrive early. It was pretty easy for me to make friends here. Everyone is very nice. Look at those sentences. It's a good idea to learn your students' names the first day. It wasn't difficult for me to remember my students' names. It isn't easy to find a parking space in the morning. It's really important to arrive early. It was pretty easy for me to make friends here. Notice the construction of these kinds of sentences. First, they begin with it. It is followed by a form of be, like is or wasn't. The verb be is followed by a noun phrase, like a good idea, or an adjective, like difficult. After the adjective or noun phrase, there is an infinitive, to, plus the base form of a verb. Sometimes there's a prepositional phrase, like for me, before the infinitive. Here are a few more examples of these sentences. It's important for you to come to class on time. It's necessary for teachers to remember students' names. It was a good idea for us to look at these examples. What do you think? What advice do you have?
So we'll go back to our book. Oop, my cursor. There. And we'll look at grammar. It plus be plus adjective plus the affirmative one. Here, we'll get a little better understanding from our light bulb. So there's the combination. It and the form of being. Let's look at these. The adjective, or as I was saying, the noun phrase, and the preposition plus the object, which is for you, and the infinitive, to know, to arrive, to it's almost like an action, but it's to do. Know your rights. So when we're speaking about the interview process, this is where they're getting these examples from. So here's our lesson. You're going to make sentences, drag the words into the correct order. So when, to ask questions, understand, don't, important, you. Remember, the sentence always begins with a capital letter. The sentence always begins with a capital letter. So that's always a clue. And these sentences, because we're using the grammar, it plus be plus adjective, starts with it. So that's always the first word. So they're giving you a clue about how that works. So let's put these sentences in their correct order. As always, they begin with it. So I'll start that one. There you go. Mm-hmm. It's Now, remember, if you don't understand, it's always important to ask questions. Someone got that right away. Good. Good job.
It's important.
Mm-hmm. It's important. It's important to ask questions. There. When you, being the Someone fill in the last one? Okay, let's look at it. It's important to ask questions when you don't understand. So they're using this in the context of the interview, the job interview. If there's a question that comes up in the job interview, and there's things you don't understand, you should ask the question to get the answers so that you can understand what they're asking you. It's important to ask questions when you don't understand. Mm-hmm. Let's look at the next one. Idea, good, late. For employees, A, to arrive, it isn't. So there's a negative in there. So we always begin with what? Where does the sentence start? What word are we starting with? Very good. It. Can you finish the sentence? It. Idea, good. Late. It for employees. It to arrive. It isn't. Late. So let's find the it, the be, the adjective, and the infinitive in this sentence. So we started with the it. That's easy. Isn't. So we talked about the contractions before. It is not. Same word. Isn't. Same as is not. It's not a good idea. A good idea is one of our noun phrases. A good idea. So it's not a description. It's not an actual object. It's just a thought. A good idea. For employees, employees being the actual noun, to arrive. To arrive is the verb, the action that's going on. They're arriving. And then late would be the affinitive, describing how they're arriving. It isn't a good idea for employees to arrive late. Let's move on to number 3. And we begin with, we begin all of them. All of these sentences are starting with what word? It, and then finish the sentence. Very good. There's our sentence. It was difficult to understand that customer. Now, we were talking in the other class about the past sort of participle. Here, this is the word, was. So this happened in the past. And someone's speaking, maybe they're speaking to their coworkers, and they had trouble understanding the customer. And they said to their coworker, it was difficult to understand that customer. Perhaps the customer spoke another language. Perhaps the customer wasn't being very friendly. So they said it was difficult to understand that customer. Let's go on to the last one, number 4. We begin the way we always begin these sentences. What's the first word? Number 4, it's. Move this down. Neatly, application, necessary, complete, to the. Let's go over those words again. It's neatly application, necessary, complete, to the. What's the correct order so that this sentence makes some sense? And you'll notice all of these are in reference to having a job, being an employee, understanding customers, working. It's necessary. Then the action to complete. The, and then we have our noun, application, and our adjective after, neatly, describing how you're doing something neatly. It's, or it is, necessary to complete the application neatly. Hang on. What do they need? Someone need something? Before we go on our last one?
Yes, I'm helping. I'll help her already.
Okay. Oh, it's not our last one. I'm sorry. We have many more to go. Does anyone have any questions about these sentences prior? As you can see, we're all starting with it, or it is, or it's, as we'll say. We'll do number 5. And again, beginning with the word it. I'll give you the first one, always. The words difficult, which you said before, English, me, speak, used to be, to for. So the sentence reads now, difficult English, me, speak, used to be, to for. That makes no sense. Let's have it make sense. It, there. It used to be, again, past, in the past. It used to be difficult for me here's our order and the last word that we're all learning English. It used to be difficult for me to speak English. It, in the past, used to be difficult for me to speak English. Now, I'm pretty good at English. So can you say the sentence out loud? It used to be difficult for me to speak English. Try it. And we'll go on to our next sentence. Number 6. Again, where do we start? What's the first word? It, correct. So we have something in the past. It's necessary to complete the application. It used to be. It, pleasure, with, to, you, was talk a. Pleasure, with, to, you, was talk a. It. What's the order? Next word. Was a pleasure. talk Uh-oh, get over there. There we go. And the last word, you. Tu. It was a pleasure to talk with you. So that's this sentence you should definitely say after your job interview. Whatever happens prior to you leaving the job interview, you should say, it was a pleasure to talk with you. So you want to leave with a good impression. You want to leave being joyous, being happy that you spent time with the interviewer. It was a pleasure to talk with you. Moving on to number 7. Our first word, as always, is it or its. It's. It's too politely for important employees at all times speak. So what is the correct order of this sentence starting with it's? We already have one of these words that we used earlier. In number 1. Important, yes. For employees to politely get over there. There we are. There's our sentence. It's important for employees to speak politely at all times. It's important for employees to speak politely at all times. Can you practice saying that sentence? It's important for employees to speak politely at all times. So they're saying at this job, if you're working there, be sure that you're speaking politely. You smile, you say hello, you greet everyone, and you speak politely to your fellow employees, to your boss, and if you have any, to your customers. It's important for employees to speak politely at all times. Here's our last sentence. We have schedule changes. Several weeks in advance, request, a good idea, to, and our first word, of course, it's. Let's make the sentence make sense. It's, what do you think? What's our next word? It's a good idea. Then our action to request. Do you know what request means? To ask. It's a good idea to request. Schedule changes. Let's go over there. Okay, there we go. Several weeks in advance. Let's say this sentence together. It's a good idea to request schedule changes several weeks in advance. So they're saying if you need time off or if you have an emergency, well, you can't make those changes but you can ask your employer to request, ask them, request schedule changes several weeks in advance. And that's a good idea. That's a smart way to request schedule changes. It's a good idea to request schedule changes several weeks in advance. So remember to save your work, submit it, and close. Save, submit, and close. We'll go on to our next lesson. If you have any questions about this lesson, please ask.
Somebody has question.
All right, let's see what the question is. Anxious to know.
No.
Go to the bottom.
Uh-huh.
No questions.
Oh.
No. Great, then let's move on in our books to our next lesson. We are still in grammar. It plus be plus adjective plus the infinitive. We did 1 and now we're on 2.
In the say, tell Luz we see her. We see Luz. Tell on the
Oh, okay.
somebody says yes, we can see you.
Just saying hello to some new friends. There. And we'll go back. Here we are. Grammar. It plus be plus adjective plus a infinitive. We're on number 2. So let's look at this lesson. And keep in mind, we're talking about jobs, working on a job, being an employee, working with customers, learning computer skills, things you need for a job. So here, what we'll do is we'll read the conversations. So these are people talking, sharing a conversation. Complete the responses. Now you're going to type. Type it is plus the adjective plus the infinitive plus the object, which is when it's necessary. Sometimes there's no object, but if there's an object, be sure to put it in there. And then use the words in the parentheses. The parentheses are these words in the brackets. They're bold, they're highlighted. Those are the words in the parentheses. Let's look at the example 1. It is difficult for new employees. Oh, that's a question. It's a question at the end of the sentence. I'll ask it like a question. Is it difficult for new employees to get the vacation dates they want? Is it difficult for new employees to get the vacation days they want? The answer, no, it isn't. No, it's not. No, it isn't. Is not. But it is necessary to make requests for time off at least 2 weeks in advance. So the words here in the parentheses, necessary, make, so this is our adjective, and our infinitive, requests. So you're saying, using these words to make the sentence, but it is necessary to make requests. So here we don't have an object. So the object's not in this example. But we have our adjective and our infinitive, which is here. So we're adding we're changing this sentence here. No, it isn't. But these words, it is necessary to make requests. Let's look at number 2. Switch to student view so you don't get some clues. Reading number 2. Let me pull this up so that I'm in the right lesson. The safety equipment on one of the machines isn't working. The safety equipment on one of the machines isn't working. So, that's the conversation. A says to B. Then B says blank immediately. Here are our words. Important. Tell your supervisor. So what do you think how do we change that so that we're using our it, which is always here, it is, and the adjective, put it in the correct context? So how do we change the sentence? So type it in. The safety equipment's not working. So it's kind of an emergency. So what are you going to say? We'll start it with it. Is. And then our word. So it is. And what word goes next? Important. Yes. And then the action to, and then the word tell, to tell, and then the last word, your supervisor.
You can let the rest for homework. We can cut it.
Okay, so do these, is this making sense? So you have to make sure that you find these, the adjective, the infinitive, the object in the sentence, and then add the it is, and before the verb, the being, to tell, to make. It is necessary to make requests. It is important to tell your supervisor. So this can be your homework. As you can see, if you go down the page, I can go down the page. There are 8 of them. And each time, you're going to change to add it is, or to ask, or before the verb, the action, what you're doing. So these will be your homework all the way through. Let's look at these and let's find if there's any words here that may be difficult to understand. Your boss is very pleasant. Everyone likes her. I agree. So these are conversations. Someone says something, A says something, B says something else. I agree. Blank for her. Easy work. So the word you just wouldn't put easy work. So you say it in the first, and then is. I agree. Easy is easy to work. So there's just 2 small words that are missing in each of the sentences so that they make sense. So put the word in. Remember, very important. You get to the bottom. Save your work. Submit it. And close. I'd be very interested to see how you do with these. Because they're not difficult. You just have to have a real understanding of how the conversation would go. and how it would flow. And speaking of conversation, when you say these, when you put in your answer, say them out loud. Have a friend or someone in your family, try to be the other person so that you can hear how you're coming across and they can get an understanding of how you are saying your phrases, your pronunciation, and what you're meaning to say. And keep in mind, each one of these are about finding a job. It's a very important thing to find a job. And be sure that you're coming across that your personality is cheerful and that you seem knowledgeable, that you know a lot of things, that you are relaxed, that you are ready to take on whatever job or whatever job interview you might get. Because a lot of times finding the job can become the job until you find the perfect job. So you got to make sure that you present yourself in a very respectable and a polite way. So that's what a lot of these lessons in this course here are about. Making sure that you are expressing yourself correctly. So look through these, add the its or the tos, whatever needs to be there. And as they said, sometimes there's an object. So here, here's an object. Hard hats, hearing protectors, those are objects. Do I need any special safety equipment in this area? Yes. What do I becomes what? It's necessary. Okay, so fill those in, save your work, submit it, and close. You guys are doing great today. You had some great answers, and it was my pleasure to go over this lesson with you. Again, it's gonna be fun. And I'll try to make it fun every time. Thanks so much for joining me. And it's good to have you with me again. It's good to be back. Take care, everyone. Have a great evening. And thanks for coming. See you next time.